Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Unexplained. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Ouija board. The Ouija board is not a game and should not be taken lightly. The Ouija board can be a very dangerous thing. The Ouija board has been used by thousands of people for spirit communication and is very similar to automatic writing. The only difference between the two being the absence of the board itself in automatic writing. Both forms of communications are very, very dangerous. So as are seances, because they are usually uncontrolled forms of afterlife communication. In other words, the individuals that use these channels are usually novices and are very unaware of the possible dangers that await. A controlled situation would be where a psychic or medium or clairvoyant is present. This way, the medium can sense any dangers that are present and close off the communication before any harm was done. The Ouija board is just a piece of compressed wood sold at virtually all toy stores and occult supply and bookstores. Ouija is a combination of two words, oui and ja, which means yes in French and German, respectively. The board itself is not dangerous, but the form of communication that you are attempting often is. Most often, the spirits whom are contacted through the Ouija are those whom reside on what is called the lower astral plane. These spirits are often very confused and may have died a violent or sudden death, like murder or suicide, etc. Therefore, many violent, negative, and potentially dangerous conditions are present to those using the Ouija board. Oftentimes, several spirits will attempt to come through at the same time, but the real danger lies when you ask for physical proof of their existence. You might say things like, well, if you're really a spirit or ghost, then put out this light or move that object. What you have just done is simple. You have opened a doorway and allowed them to enter into the physical world, and future problems can and often do arise. I strongly suggest that anyone who even thinks about using the Ouija board or any type of automatic writing or seances do not. If you don't happen to be the lucky or unlucky enough, depends on how you look at it, to contact any ghost, then if nothing else, you could become emotionally attached or dependent on the board's advice. This can be a psychological and kind of a psyche that makes it adverse, as you are willing to attempt to get more and more information out of the board or the ghost, and you could actually just be using the board as an avenue to the inside of your own mind without even really using it. In other words, you could be asking questions of the board, and then your subconscious mind would be using the board to answer your own questions. This often happens to people who use the board by themselves. I believe that what you should do is not use the board at all, because even though the board has been created or seemingly created by a regular person, it is the method that is dangerous. It's similar to driving in a car, and you think that, well, you're driving, instead of driving in a car, you're driving a speed buggy. You know, you're just kind of driving a speed buggy and it's like a toy and you're like having a great time, and you feel that, well, I'm not driving a car, so it's not as dangerous. But you're still on a road, you're still operating a vehicle that is gearing you forward, and you are still in danger of crashing and being hit by other oncoming vehicles. that may be a speed buggy or maybe an actual car or truck or many different things. So you are still in very much danger, even though what you're driving seems to be more of a recreational vehicle. It's the same thing. You are still in danger. And so that's what people have to think about when you're thinking about the Ouija board. Now, where the hell did the Ouija board come from anyway? Why is it if it's so dangerous, if it's such a spiritual type of game or form of communication, then why is it in every single major toy store or department store ever created? Well, the origins of the Ouija board is still shrouded in a bit of mystery. A man named Charles Kennard lived in Chestertown, Maryland, and he claimed to have invented the board that would become the Ouija board, or what some people call the talking boards. He asked a man who worked next to him, a man named E.C. Reich, a cabinet maker and a coffin maker, to make a few of these Ouija boards as he instructed for him. Reich later claimed that he came up with the idea and that Charles Kennard had taken it from him and went on to make it a business. So we don't really know who actually made the business. That's why it's kind of shrouded in this whole thing. You know, there was no such thing as copyrights back then. And so you didn't copyright your material, so you just kind of came up with an idea. You told somebody, they created it for you, and then you kind of hoped that that person wouldn't just use you and say, hey, I came up with the idea because I'm making it, so therefore I came up with the idea. So that's kind of what Reich did. Later, the game Ouija became such a huge hit in Chestertown from 1886 to 1890. Kennard goes to Baltimore and he meets Elijah Bond, who was a lawyer, and in April of 1890, they may have had a seance. So they have this seance with Elijah Bond's sister-in-law, who was Helen Peters, who Bond called her a strong medium. So, you know, he kind of looked at her as a medium, so she would be the one who could facilitate this type of communication. Now, they asked the board what it wants to be called, because it didn't really have a name at that time in the 1800s. It spelled out O-U-I-J-A. And when they asked, well, what does that mean? The board spelled out G-O-O-D-L-U-C-K, or good luck. The building where the seance happened is still there. It's 529 North Charles Street in Chestertown, and now it's a 7-Eleven. Okay. Now, spirit communication devices took off in the Civil War, which happened between 1861 and 1865, when there was a massive amount of death. When every family, they had lost a father or a son, a grandpa, or a nephew, the victims often didn't have any ID, so they couldn't return the body to the families, to these grieving poor souls. So these spirit communications devices were used to answer questions that nothing else could. Like, my dad went away to war, why didn't he come back? Times of economic depression and wars seem to be when lots of these so-called talking boards, quote unquote, took off. You wrote letters, waited for a response, and in the meantime, wanted some way to know if your son or your father was okay. For instance, during the Vietnam War, which happened between 1955 and 1975, Parker Brothers buys the Ouija board in 1966, and then in 1967, it outsold Monopoly. That's the only time any game has ever outsold Monopoly. People were really trying very hard to deal with their grief and their loss. Now, there have been many movies that have portrayed the Ouija board from one way or the other, but it was in 1973 with the movie The Exorcist that it had a huge impact on how people viewed the board. Earlier movies would just make it out to be a joke. a game. You're having fun with family and friends, and you're contacting quote-unquote spirits. No big deal, no big whoop, and you're just having a good time. But when The Exorcist came out, it's inferred that the little girl, the main character in the movie, uses the board and then becomes possessed by a demon. So this idea of demonic possession of the Ouija board takes off and terrified America. All of the urban legends about the Ouija board stemmed from The Exorcist, and also in the movie Witchboard. So, is this just a joke? Just a game that was made up? Or is this truly real? Now here are some stories to kind of let you think about this. In 2014, an orphan named Alexandra Hirter used a Ouija board with her brother and a cousin in an attempt to reach her deceased parents. A few minutes into the seance, Alexandra started growling, thrashing around in a trance-like state, and speaking in tongues. Her brother and cousin also reported feeling possessed, with hallucinations, blindness, deafness, and muscle spasms. Alexandra's guardian, Maria, tried to get a local priest to perform an exorcism, but he refused because they were not regular churchgoers, and he was not qualified. A lesson to be learned here, people. If you're not a tithe-paying member of a church, they don't give a fuck about you. But that's another episode. Now, Maria called the paramedics because she wasn't getting any help from the priest. So she called the paramedics and had the trio hospitalized. While Maria believes without a shadow of a doubt that Alexandra was possessed by a spirit, the three kids were taking a powerful shamanistic drug called Bruxmansia that can cause many of the described symptoms. So maybe they were just drugged by this, there were just side effects of this particular drug, or maybe it was real. I don't know. Next story. Angela Jackson attended a spiritualistic meeting, and the psychic gave her a warning from her father, who had died 20 years before. The warning was, "You're thinking about using a Ouija board?" Came the message, "Don't. No good will come of it." Angela had always had an interest in the spiritual, and she had always been intrigued by Ouija boards. So one night, she went to a neighbor's house and they pulled out a homemade Ouija board. When asked, the Ouija board said it wanted to speak to Angela. Then it spelled out, "Die, bitch." The spirit identified itself as Satan and said it was murdered just like you will be. The glass they were using as a blanket flew across the room and smashed into the wall. Everyone was scared, and over the next few months, Angela convinced her friends to try to reach the spirit again, but they were never successful. One day, Angela was leaving the house to go visit her adult son when she heard a voice behind her. "Die, bitch." A man growled, wielding a claw hammer. He hammered her over the head twice before she lost consciousness. She awoke in the hospital with a fractured skull. The police never caught anyone in the attack, and while Angela never used the Ouija board again, she still lives in fear that she will be murdered. Now the last story I'm going to tell is a story about someone you may know. The famous actress, Goldie Hawn. We all know her, we all love her. Now, Goldie Hawn had a haunting experience with a Ouija board in the 1980s, but hers had a happy ending, so okay, that's good to know. One night, after the kids were asleep, Hawn and her partner, we all know, Kurt Russell, and their nanny decided to give the Ouija board a go. For fun, like most people think. For fun. What the whoop. When asked who was with them, the board spelled out new baby Russell. Hawn was not pregnant. She continued asking, "Do you know what you want to be?" And then it said, "Happy." And then she asked, "Who is willing you in?" And it said, Oliver, Hawn's eldest child. Russell and the nanny were both blindfolded while moving the pancetta, which, is a little triangular board that moves around as you touch it with your fingers. So they had no idea what was happening. Suddenly, young Oliver, woken by a nightmare, comes downstairs. Hawn put him back to bed and asked the Ouija board one more question. Do you know that you are coming to me? The board answered yes. Bye, Mommy. Hawn later gave birth to her third child, Wyatt, on July 10th, 1986. All right. So, guys, what do you think? Do you think the Ouija board is real, or do you think that it's just a game? Something created by a guy just out of fun, wanting to make a little money, and then it just kind of took off because people, when they're grieving, they will do anything to speak to their loved ones one more time. Now, if you have been listening to the other videos that I have posted, you know that I do believe in ghosts, and I do believe that there is life after death, and that we continue. So, do I believe that Ouija boards are real? I would say this. Even though I believe that this guy Kennard invented a game in order to make a little money, but I believe the actual idea of the game, the fact of you are interacting with a spirit. You can interact with spirits many different ways. You can do it via this particular Ouija board system. You can do it via prayer. You can do it via meditation. You can even do it just simply by talking out loud and purposely thinking of your loved one, or talking to an invisible friend. The imaginary friend that you had when you were a little girl or boy. Who were you talking to, and who was answering you in your mind? I believe the imaginary friend comes from maybe a ghost or a spirit inside of your home that answered you as a child. Because as children, we tend to be a little bit more open because we just came from the other life. So in our new life, we just simply talk to what we see and or feel. Now for the Ouija board purposely opens up a door. I think when you talk to your loved one in prayer, or your loved one when you're talking to them saying, you're talking about your day, like you left your mother died, or your husband died, or whatever, or your child died, so you talk to them. I believe that you actually get them because you're not opening up any doors. You are specifically channeling them, and they are always around you. All of your ancestors and people who love you and are there to help you are always with you. So they can help you and they hear you. But when you do a Ouija board, I look at it like this. Think of it as in the summer when you open the door, you open your screen door and you walk outside and you go back and forth, or you open the door for a delivery or someone coming in, and then later on during the day, you're sitting at home and you're watching TV or whatever, and then you notice that there's a fly or a wasp or a bee in your house, and you're like, how the hell did this get in here? And you realize, well, I didn't have the door open for very long, so how did it get in there? As soon as you open the door, all kinds of things fly in. There are things in the air right now that you cannot see. Dust, particles, all kinds of things that are all around you at all times. You cannot see, but they come in and out all the time. So when you open the door, even though you don't see the fly come in, or the bee or the wasp, it came in and you didn't even notice it. It's the same with a Ouija board, in my opinion. When you arbitrarily just open the door and say, who is here? Who wants to talk? Anybody, and then the spirit goes, oh, okay, I guess I can talk. So it does. Now that spirit may be benign. It may be, the spirits are not so much good or evil. They're just like people, because a lot of them just aren't. They were people. They have all the emotions, and some of them are, as it said earlier, they are people who have died suddenly. So when you die suddenly or tragically, you may carry that immediate emotion of fear or anger that you died so suddenly or whatever around. So therefore, this spirit now may be very angry, or it needs to talk, it needs to get a message, and you are its vessel to get that message across to their loved one or to interact with the world. These are lost souls who may not understand that they're dead, or maybe upset that they're dead. So therefore, or they can't move on for whatever reason. So therefore, they use you in order to interact with the physical world in order maybe so they can move on. Similar to the series Ghost Whisperer, which I totally love. Love that series. Hated the way it ended, but that's another series for me to talk about later. But it's just like that. When you open the door and you don't have a true screen, and your screen can be a medium or a psychic or people like that who know how to stop anything wrong from coming in. And if you just open the door and you just hold it open and say, hey, whoever wants to come in, hopefully it'll be my loved one. Maybe it will be, but maybe your loved one will be pushed to the side so these other entities can come in, because they know this is my only chance. Finally, somebody is opening the door and I can come in, and they're inviting me in. And your loved one, it could be there, but they may not be able to speak or to help you. So my advice, do not use a Ouija board. You want to talk to your loved one? Just talk. They are all around you all the time. They are with you. I believe that spirits follow you through your lifetime, and then when you die, they're there waiting for you. And then when all of their loved ones have died, then we all move on to the next plane of existence. We are reincarnated if we have to come back and learn more things, or we move on to the next level. But we travel in groups, and once we travel in groups, we understand and we wait for those that we love. So you don't have to do anything special to talk to them. You don't even have to go to a psychic. If you want to, you can, but we're all psychic in a way. So all you have to do is just talk to them. You can pray to them, you can meditate, or you can simply just start talking, and they will hear you. And they know that your heart is reaching out to them. And they will just sit and they will listen, and they will give you messages or signs if it's needed. So don't use a Ouija board, because you're opening up a door that you can't close. Once you open up the floodgates, how do you close it? How do you send the water back? You can't. So if you want to talk to your loved ones, just talk. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Unexplained. Peace.